So since I last spoke to you, I have worked my way through that row of pictures now. So that's one rotation of the head. And as I said earlier, I do like to just put the grid on once every row of pictures, just to make sure that nothing's moved about, because things do have a habit of eking forwards or backwards. So it's just good to do the grid from the front and from the side, just to make sure that everything's right from the front and your depths are still working okay. Quick word of advice, once you have your hair on, your profile with the bald head won't fit. So I just slice off from the hairline down and it still fits on fine, and you can still do the grid just like I did show you before. Obviously, I've since worked on it and wiped off the grid. Now, you might remember in Strong Foundations that I talked about drawing lines onto your sculpture to help you to see the shapes. And that's exactly what I do with this technique as well. Basically, as I have been trying to explain throughout this process, you start off by looking for big dynamic shapes and seeing how the shapes within them fit together. And as the process continues and you want your sculpture to become more detailed, your shapes become smaller, and as a result, your sculpture becomes gradually more and more detailed. In this lesson, I'm going to be looking at two photos with the head very turned. So we've looked at the head slightly turned, we've looked at a mid 3/4 angle, and now I'm going to look with the head turned quite far 3/4 angle, both sides. And once again, I've made some beautiful drawings to try to illustrate to you what I'm looking for when I'm looking at these photos. So as you can see, this is literally one of the ugliest pictures yet, but it's just to try and help you to see some of the shapes that I would be looking for when I'm looking at this photo. So obviously, to start off with, I'm looking at the whole outline of the face, that furthest away profile, the shape of the eye socket, the shape of the forehead, the shape of the hairline. Does the face as a whole look right within the hairline? Does the hair look like basically the right shape? Is there enough neck behind the jaw? Does the ear sit correctly at the right angle? So those are the big shapes to start off with. And then when I'm happy with that, I want to look and break down this complicated image into simple shapes for me to just try and trick my eye to see if they look right. For instance, I'm looking at this shadow coming down the cheek. Does this sort of elliptical shape look the right shape? I'm trying to just see that when I'm looking at it, and I might draw that line onto my sculpture. Another thing, I've drawn on my brows, but what about this shape coming down the side of the eye there, that cutting back area of the eye socket? Does it cut down enough? What if I just try and see the whole brow and that shape as one shape? What about the curve of the brow? It's sort of like a bird shape when you look at it, sort of like this shape. Can I match that on my sculpture? This is the way that you learn how to draw or to sculpt anything. It's kind of obvious, but then when you really understand what it is, it's a huge light bulb moment. If you can look at a shape, hold it in your mind and match it onto your piece of work, that is representational art. What about this shape here? If I go along the top of the brow and come down the edge of the nose there, round that fullness and kicks out at the end of the nose, along the cheekbone fullness and the eye socket, if that were just a shape on its own, does it match that negative space on my sculpt? If you can understand this concept properly, it is going to elevate your work so much. I remember I had this light bulb moment when I was studying at Florence Academy, and I was actually copying a pencil drawing by Charles Barg. And the guy teaching me said to me, it's just a case of holding the shape in your mind and replicating it on your drawing. And it sounds so obvious, but when it really clicks, it is absolutely game-changing. If you can hold a shape, the exact shape in your mind, and replicate it, you've got it. Your work is going to be so much better. Okay, so other shapes that I've just highlighted here as examples, find that nasolabial fold, the shape of the nodule at the side of the mouth, go along the top of the lip and along that tube coming down the side of the philtrum and the nostril shape, and just try and find that exact shape. Down around here, along the edge of the lip, up there and around. And the same on the other side, you know, down that line, down, and I could just about make out where the nasolabial fold is on the other side. And it's just going to inform you how much fleshiness you need on that sort of moustachey area, because this is actually much more full and rich in form than people often sculpt it. I've already spoken about this curve. You can see he's got this kind of like long round ball shape on his chin with a dimple in the middle. What are the shadows telling you about that form? Try and match that almost circular shape. And then he has this fullness below his bottom lip. Really try and focus in on what those shadows are telling you about that form and just match that shape. And underneath that bottom lid there, it's a really rich, full form. Anything you can do to add fleshiness and richness to your forms is just going to lift your sculpture and give it more life. So I've drawn on some of those shapes just to help me to see. So obviously my hairline is all drawn on, and I've looked at my whole shape of my face and the outline of that furthest away profile. And then I've drawn on that brow shape to just help me to match that fullness of the brow area. I've drawn on my eyebrows, the eye bags coming under, and then I'm looking for that overall shape that I talked about there. I've just drawn on that line to help me to see, is that where the plane change happens? That's where it should cut down like that. Then I've drawn on that shadow shape in the cheek so that I can look at that elliptical shape. I'm looking at the angle of my ear. Does that feel right in relation to the face, within the hairline, the shape of the jaw? I've drawn on my nasolabial fold coming down under that nodule, and then Henry Cavill actually has a little scar there, so I've just drawn that on as well. I've drawn on the shape of that shadow coming under his lip. It's just sculpting the forms but helping you to see that by drawing lines on. And I've drawn on that shape of the little mouth side panel area and the curve of the chin coming round like that. And then I can just really see much more easily shapes like, what is the shape coming down that line around along the edge of the lip there and up to that ridge? Is that matching the shape on my picture? Is this furthest away shape matching? Is there enough material here? These are the questions that I'm asking myself when I'm sculpting. Great, so I've been working on this for a while now, and up until this point I've just been using my wooden tools, my loop tools. There's still quite a lot of texture on the surface. So when I get to this stage where I'm happy that all my shapes are fitting together okay, it's time to start refining the surface and unifying those forms a bit more, but being very careful not to lose all those forms that I've searched so hard for. So I'm going to start off by unifying this cheek area using my large guitar string tool. And just being ever so careful not to lose the information that I've already found. But I'm going around the forms just to kind of, as you can see, suddenly you can really see the subtlety of the form once you start to unify it like this. So I've not changed anything, I'm not taking away clay, I'm just actually describing those shapes that I found in a more subtle, unified way. It's not like I'm finishing it, this is just before continuing, just because I'm getting more and more accurate as the process goes on. There's my temporal ridge there, so I'm just carving it in a bit more, but then going across it just to get that rounded form. And then there's that brow shape that I drew on. So I know that's where it's got to go, but I'm just curving around it. Now I do show you how to make these tools in Strong Foundations. They literally are just an old guitar string looped around in a piece of brass rod, but I do show you in great detail how to make them. And you can make them any size or shape you want, really. Okay, so I've done the bigger areas and now I want to go in and do the same thing to some of the slightly smaller, more detailed areas. So I'm just using a smaller guitar string tool. So again, just being really careful not to scrape off hardly any clay. I'm just trying to unify what I've already found. There's my rich under eye bag, or lid, shall I say. This area that's cutting down there. And nostril. And then I've drawn on that nasolabial fold, but it's actually very subtle on him because he's quite young. These get much deeper as you get older, so, you know, don't want to over exaggerate it. If you exaggerate any of these shapes too much, it just makes people look really old. And he's got that little dink there. Might want to just fill in if it's gone too deep. Okay, I can't emphasise enough, we're not finishing it here, we're just unifying what we've already found to see exactly what we've got at this stage. So the knack is to smooth and unify without losing any information or form that you've already spent so much time searching for. And then same with the ear. So I keep my screwing right up till the very end because, you know, when you're trying to do your grid, you need to have something to pinpoint it to. So with ears, obviously, as I've already said, I'm looking at them when I'm looking for every angle. People often say, oh, how do you sculpt an ear? Well, it's not like you just sculpt an ear on its own. You sculpt an ear as part of a portrait because everyone's ears are different, and you sculpt their particular ear in relation to their particular face. Thing is, there's no set way to sculpt an ear. Everyone's ears are different, and obviously you need to sculpt your ear in relation to everything else and keep it going at the same pace as everything else. It's not like you're just suddenly like, okay, I'm just going to sculpt the ear now, because if you do that, you'll inevitably have to keep changing it when you're looking from other angles. So for now, I have worked on this from lots of different angles. I'm just unifying what I've got, but no doubt I'll probably have to change it again as the process continues. In Strong Foundations, I did explain to you that they are basically made up of the tragus here, the antitragus, which is that notch there. Then you have this fullness and the lobe. And then you have a, well, in reverse, this is a big 9 shape coming around the outside. And then on the inside, you have this Y shape. And something I would say is, try to look at just this shape of the inside of the ear, because I often see people make this enormous, this hole, and it really isn't. But it is different on everyone, so just look at your particular model. Now I'm going to get some water onto the surface, but again, I can't stress this enough, be so careful not to wash away all the detail that you've already found up to this point, because water will just wash away a layer of clay if you're not careful. So I'm just going to very carefully use a mixture of paint brushes and makeup brushes, a little bit of water squeezed out on a tissue paper, and then just, again, go over the surface carefully, just unifying what I've already got. So this is just a wonky old big makeup brush. I've just squeezed it out because I really don't want too much water on there. and I'm going to use my big brush on the bigger areas. Okay, so I'll start off with this shape. I'm remembering that big elliptical shape that I searched for in my photo. I'm just carefully smoothing that off, going across the forms. And again, we're not finishing anything here, we're just using this to unify it so we can see it, but also when you add water onto the surface, this is counterintuitive, but it does actually harden the clay, because harder surfaces dry out quicker. So as soon as that water's come off the surface, your clay will dry out much quicker once you've added water to it. So beware, you will need to spray it more often once you get to this stage. I'm just also going right under the chin. It's easy to neglect the area underneath the chin, but actually it's really important as a way of gauging how heavy or old someone is, because larger people carry a lot of weight under their chin, whereas someone incredibly young and fit like Henry Cavill here isn't going to have much body fat under there. So don't neglect to look at how much material you've got under there. And then same thing on the forehead. There's my temple ridge. And there's this fullness on the other side is actually that temporal muscle. So sometimes you get a bit of a bulge there on a younger person. So you can see, once you actually smooth off the surface, you can just see the forms more accurately. And then I'm going to use some of my smaller brushes on the more detailed areas. So just carefully going around the forms. I will undoubtedly have to remodel everything I'm doing here to some degree, but it's just going to help me when I now stand back to look at exactly what I have. Now, Henry Cavill has such a lot going on around his mouth corners. He's quite a complex person to sculpt. And round that bobble on his chin, getting that dimple in. Great, so as you can see, it's very far from finished. It's still quite lumpy, the surface, but it's just the fact that it's smooth is helping you to see the exact forms that you have found up to this stage. So just moving the process along. So you can see the contrast. I've smoothed off this side and this side still looks really abstract. So I haven't actually changed any of the forms on this side. I've just smoothed it off. And as you can see, it's just easier to see what you've got now that it's got a smooth surface. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same on this side. I'm looking at the overall outline, then I'm looking at the shapes within, shape of the face, and then breaking it down into smaller shapes within. And I've drawn those onto my sculpt, and then I'm going to refine them. And then on this picture, I've just highlighted those key shapes of the ear that I talked about. You've got the blue shape is a big 9, and that's the curve going round the outside of your ear. And then within that, you've got a Y shape, which I've highlighted in green. and then you've got two fullnesses, the tragus here, and then you've got the notch of the antitragus, and then you've got this fullness here. So those two fullnesses are blobbed on in orange. So once again, I'm just going to start off with the bigger areas with my bigger guitar string tool. I'm just drawing together those forms that I've already found when I'm standing back. So I've just unified both sides now, and it's always quite satisfying at this stage because all of your hard work and holding back and looking abstractly suddenly starts to pay off, because hopefully it starts to look like an actual person, and even more hopefully it starts to look like the person that you're sculpting. So I'm now going to continue, and I'm going to go through my next row of pictures, and then I'll grid it up again, and then I'll come back to you in the next lesson and I'll talk about looking at pictures that are taken from the profile in really light and dark dramatic lighting, and also from photos taken a little bit more than the profile, so that you're looking just from over someone's shoulder, because those photos are actually really helpful as well.